See, look at this. So I'm actually using the Tilta Nucleus M on the camera here. I think I'm in focus now. Boom. Video on this coming soon, so be subscribed. Hey, what's up guys? My name is Cameron Gallagher and I am jacked up because I just bought a film camera, so we have film videos coming soon. Yes, that's right. Photography, not video, but still. Anyway guys, let's get into it. So I've been on this real vintage kick recently, and I wanted to kind of talk about how to achieve an anamorphic look and a sort of vintage anamorphic look in a modern day cinema space. So obviously if you don't know what an anamorphic lens is, it is a lens that basically shoots in a stretched form, so that way when you de-squeeze it later on, it is a widescreen cinemascope aspect ratio. This was originally because cameras were 4x3, so the camera sensors were square. So what this did is it allows for cameras to capture more of a horizontal? What the f? So what this did is it allowed for cameras to capture more of an actual view from the horizon, and that way for films like Lawrence of Arabia or these big, wide, grand type of films, you could just see that much more width and it was more immersive, or at least kind of. So anyway, today anamorphic lenses have a really awesome look to them. Some are really clean. Of course, the old vintage ones have a lot of character to them. And I wanted to talk about how to get that look for a much, much cheaper price, because anamorphic lenses are very expensive, and even the cheap ones are still very expensive, just about $8,000 a lens. So I came across this Vid-Atlantic filter a long time ago, and it's pretty much been the go-to for an anamorphic look without shooting anamorphic. But before we talk about the filter, there's a few things you want to do beforehand, I think, to actually set up using this filter. The first thing is to actually shoot widescreen if you can. Now on the Ursa Mini Pro G2, I can shoot at 2:4:1, but if you can't do that, you can always just do it in the editing software later. But again, if you can shoot it in camera, I think it's better. I think it just helps with the framing and stuff like that. The next thing is, if you can, shoot on a vintage lens. Now with the anamorphic filter, you have to shoot on a little bit of a longer lens, so like a 40mm plus. So in my case, I'm actually using the Helios 44-2 50mm lens. This thing looks awesome. It has really cool bokeh anyway, so I think it just sort of helps match. And because it is a vintage lens, you get a little bit more of that vintage character, which I think the anamorphic filter just helps bring out. And lastly, I actually use a Black Pro Mist 1.8. I would actually probably say using a Black Pro Mist 1.4 and stacking this with the anamorphic filter, I think is gonna make a huge difference. It just kind of blooms the highlights, and again, has a little more of an organic feel, which I think we just correlate to that vintage anamorphic film look. So the anamorphic filter itself is pretty self-explanatory. It basically just helps shape the bokeh, so that way when you're actually shooting, you have to shoot wide open. It has that anamorphic bokeh, and it also focuses like an anamorphic lens. So you can see that with it on, it just has a very cool and old school look. Now, of course, it does flare a little bit too. There's a little like string piece in the middle, and I got the lower version of the flare, which I kind of regret. I wish I'd gotten like the high flare version. So you can of course pick and choose whichever one works best for you. But in this case, you get those J.J. Abrams sort of classic, anamorphic flares, which I think looks really nice. So this isn't a super stylized look, but it definitely has that push towards that. And I think with the combination of the Black Pro Mist and the actual Vid-Atlantic filter itself, you just get a very nice anamorphic look. And again, it's pretty close, and for the price, you really can't beat it. Now, one of the things I recommend doing in post is actually adding a tilt shift blur. Now, a tilt shift blur is like mimicking a tilt shift lens, but in DaVinci Resolve in particular, you're adding a blur on the top and bottom of the frame, which is usually what happens to anamorphic lenses. If you go back and watch a lot of your favorite movies that are shot in anamorphic, you can see that the top and bottom of the actual frame is a little bit out of focus. Not out of focus like as, the actual focus, but it's from, it's like an artifact of the actual de-squeezing itself. So I find adding that just adds a hint more and just kind of sells that effect that much more. And of course, lastly, I would just color grade and make it look as, film or whatever you want to look like. And again, it just sort of, can capture that vintage sort of film vibe to it. So I think this anamorphic filter is really, really awesome. It's super cheap. It's easy to use. It easily fits to any camera. They have, I think, a few different types of actual filter sizes, but you can always adapt if you want. And it just looks awesome. You can see from the footage here that we did with Zach, it just has that really awesome anamorphic characteristic to it. And again, it's so much cheaper and it's so much easier, and it's something that we can do for a very low cost and use whenever we need to. So anyway guys, that was a quick look at the Vid-Atlantic Anamorphic Filter. Be sure to subscribe to some future videos coming soon. We got a ton of awesome videos coming soon. So again, subscribe if you're not. A lot of good stuff coming. So anyway guys, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys later.